The bigger sticks caught fire, and I smiled. I'd done it. I stacked bigger and bigger branches on the flames as they grew until a basketball-sized fire snapped and glowed on my little island. It looked almost cheerful, but I was still shivering so bad I could hardly breathe, and I was wearing clothes soaked with ice water. I piled on a couple of logs as thick as my arm, and when they caught and crackled into flame, I held my hands as close to the fire as I could stand until they started tingling with sharp, painful bolts of feeling. I flexed my fingers and stretched my palms until my hands mostly worked again, then started pulling off my wet clothes. I got my jacket off, then my sweatshirt, then my t-shirt. I shivered worse when the wind hit my bare skin, but I knew it was better than being in wet clothes. So I went to work on my shoelaces. I got one shoe off and then added another log to the fire and then got the other shoe off. Next came my socks, then my pants, and then I crouched beside the fire so close it hurt. Bit by bit my body warmed. I could feel the deathly river water drying in the fire's heat. I was still covered in goosebumps, and gusts of wind still chilled me from time to time, but my shaking had calmed to just normal shivering, and my teeth stopped chattering uncontrollably. I wasn't going to die. Not there, anyway. Not then. I closed my eyes and let that thought roll over me. I'd fought the river and the cold and the darkness, and I'd won. I looked down at myself squatting in dripping underwear by a fire under a bridge. I started laughing and crying at the same time. It was mostly a happy feeling. Bo still stood beside me, drying his fur by the fire. The flames flickered in on his one brown eye and one green. He cocked his head at my strange laughter. "I was afraid of dying," I said down to him. He whined and licked my bony knee. I scratched him behind his ears. I sniffed at my tears and laughed again. Here I am on this trip, and I was afraid of dying. But my crazy smile faded when I saw Bo looking up at me. There was nothing but love in that dog, nothing but trust. I swallowed and took a few shaky breaths. "You almost died too," I said to him. It was horrible to say out loud, to admit that I dragged Bo into just because I didn't want to be alone, and I knew he'd follow me anywhere. "I'm sorry, Bo. That was never part of my plan. It was never part of it. That's the honest truth." I kept scratching him behind the ears long after my fingers got tired and my arm ached, as if that made up for it. It was a long night. I kept the fire going strong and stretched my wet clothes out on dead log branches around it. It took hours for them to dry, and meanwhile I was almost naked on an island in the middle of a mountain storm. I was exhausted down to my very middle. I ate an apple from my backpack and shared a couple of granola bars with Bo. All my mind and body wanted to sleep, but I needed dry clothes to sleep in. I talked to Bo to keep myself awake. Once, during the darkest hour of the night, I wandered away from the fire to go gather more firewood. I looked back at our soggy little camp. The firelight was bright and cozy, flashing and flickering on the sand and the boulder and the logs. Bo was curled up within the circle of light. He looked warm and happy. All around our fire was darkness and wind and the mad roaring river. I got a lump in my throat. It was awful and sad and miserable, but it was beautiful. The camera was around my neck, and I took a picture of the fire in the storm, the light and the darkness, and the brown patchy dog. When my clothes were finally dry, I threw my last 3 logs in the fire, big fat ones, and then laid down next to Bo. The fire snapped and muttered. The wind whistled between the rocks. The river was a never-ending wet rumble. From time to time, there was the sound of car tires on the bridge above us. I was asleep before I could even decide to close my eyes. In the morning, I was stiff and sore and starving, but I was alive and more determined than ever to finish what I'd started. I'd come too far and survived too much to give up. That's the truth. I looked through my backpack to see what I had left. a couple more apples and some bananas and a few more granola bars and most of a pouch of beef jerky, a bottle of water, and a baggie of dog treats. Not much food, I said to Bo, who was scratching sleepily at his ear with his hind leg, but I don't have much time anyway. It'll be enough. Before shoving my notebook into the backpack, I opened it up. It had gotten a little wet, but the backpack had kept it mostly safe. Some of the pages stuck together a little, but it was savable. I sat on a log and looked around at our little island camp. Bo was lapping up some river water to wash down his beef jerky breakfast. I thought the night before of the fire and the darkness and the picture I'd taken, and I wrote, "All the world is dark, but together we build light. Shared, it keeps us warm." We crossed carefully back over the log and climbed the bank up to the highway. It was long and empty in the morning light. The rain was just a sprinkle, but dark clouds promised more. Wind slipped its fingers down my collar and up my sleeve. I missed my fire already. Ahead, where the black road twisted out of sight between black trees and gray sky, was the mountain. I still couldn't see it, but I could feel it more than ever, like it was watching me, like it was waiting for me. "Miles to go, buddy," I said down to Bo with a nod. "Let's do it." I didn't know how long we walked, miles, hours. I don't have numbers for it. The days and the cold and the food and the journey had taken their toll on my body. My legs made the journey. My legs made me work for each step, and my stomach threatened to throw up the little breakfast I'd had. My head was full of fierce pain trying to push its way out through my eyes. I just looked at the empty road right in front of my feet and put a foot there, then did it again and again. Bo ambled beside me, tongue out, tail wagging. He looked up at me from time to time, and when he did, I tried to give him a smile. I was lost in thoughts that were as dark as the clouds that hid the mountain. Thoughts of the past year, the 7 years since the summer phone call made my mom cry. Thoughts of doctors' offices, hospital beds, nurses with kind voices and sad eyes, cheerful cards from classroom friends, notes from best friends. I thought about the people I'd left behind, my mom, my dad, Jesse. I thought about my grandpa, who used to make me blush when he called me his hero. He'd given me his silver pocket watch, and I'd carried it everywhere. I'd loved it, until things got worse, and its ticking sound more like footsteps coming up behind me. I loved the watch until I started hating time and how it ran out. In a little, I thought about what was coming, about what I was walking toward, up ahead, there in the clouds, about where I was going and what I was doing. I was every different kind of sad there is, and every kind of determined too. In all that I thought of, I never thought of stopping. I was so lost in thought, I didn't notice when the truck pulled up beside me and slowed down. I saw Bo perk up his ears and look over, but I was too sick, too tired to notice the man through the window and how he was looking at me. I didn't notice until he rolled the window down and the sour, sweet smell of cigar hit my nose. Bo growled. "Hey, kid," he hollered through the rain. "Get in, and don't bother saying no." Chapter 8.5. Another morning. New light, new day, same worry. A nightmare that stays. Jessie had been chased by dark dreams all night, and she woke up tired. The bed was warm, and she didn't want to leave it. She didn't want to have to face anything or anyone. "Come on, mi amor," her mom said from the doorway. "You should try to go to school today. You won't have to think about it so much. I've got cereal waiting for you." School. Everyone would know about Mark running away, of course. It had been all over the news. Everyone would act weird. They all knew he was her best friend. Her teacher would treat her different. The kids would all whisper. She'd be completely alone. God, would they call his name at attendance? Would that be worse than skipping it? The counselor would probably try and talk to her. The counselor always tried to talk to her, but there was only ever one person she really wanted to talk to. She was afraid that somehow they would all know. She could hide it from just her mom's eyes, or just his parents' eyes, or the police, but there would be so many eyes on her all the time. You can't fit a secret in a backpack. But worst of all, it would all be without him. He was who she walked to school with, who sat next to who she sat next to in class, who she shared lunch with. There were all those eyes in that one little space next to her where he was supposed to be. He would feel so much, much more gone, and she would feel so much more alone. A hard fist hit her in the stomach. This is how it might always be now, every day, with him gone, forever. Always the empty space beside her. She might have to face this every day, but not today. She would give her life one more day to completely fall apart. "I'm not going," she said when she walked into the kitchen. Her mom opened her mouth to argue, but then closed it and nodded. "All right, baby." She went back to her bed and lay down on top of the blankets and rolled onto her side. She blinked at the icy rain picking at the windows. The sun was up somewhere, but from where she was, she could only see clouds, black as funeral suits. Half herself missing. Empty desk she could not face. A best friend absent. Chapter 9, Miles to Go, 24. The rain was pouring down now. I hadn't noticed that either, tangled in the mud of my thoughts. The wind had gotten stronger and colder. The storm was picking up. "Get in," the man repeated. He had a thick mustache and a white cowboy hat. He had one arm draped over the steering wheel, and he was leaning over the seat to shout out the passenger side window at me. I just stared at him and swallowed. Beside me, Bo whined. I was gasping for breath like I'd just run a marathon. My legs ached. Rainwater ran down my back. My head hurt so bad I had to squint one eye. "Listen, kid, you can't be out in this," the man said, shaking his head. "It's only getting worse, they say. May snow even. Get in and I'll give you a ride." I shook my head. "No, thanks," I said. I'd planned on yelling, but my voice came out raspy and weak. "I'm fine, I'll walk." The man shook his head again. "You're crazy. You'll catch your death of cold. Where are you heading, paradise?" I bit my lip and looked up at the road. A blustery howl of wind hit me, and I actually had to shift my feet to keep from stumbling. The raindrops were sharp, angry nails hammered into my jacket. "Yeah," I finally answered. "You're crazy," he repeated. "That's miles and all uphill. You'll never make it. Heck, I couldn't even make it. Hop in." "I've got a dog," I said. "That's fine. It's just a crummy truck." "And a knife." He screwed his eyebrows up. "Okay, just don't stab me with it." I stood there. My brain was too fuzzy to think. "Look, I get it," the man said, dropping his voice. "You're being smart, but I ain't a weirdo. I'm helping you out, son. You're going to die out here. Hop in." All the lessons I'd learned from my teachers and parents told me not to get in the truck. But his eyes and his voice told me something else. A stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet. That's something my grandpa used to say. It's a dumb saying. There's lots of bad strangers out there, but I guess just about anything can be true sometimes. I opened the truck door with a rusty squeak. I picked Bo up and put him on the bench seat first, between me and the driver. With my backpack in my hands, I climbed up inside and clanged the door shut. The man nodded at me and put the truck in gear, and we lurched into motion. I kept my shoulder pressed against the door and one hand on the handle just in case. "Name's Wesley," the man said, his eyes on the road in front of him. "Oh, I'm Jesse," I replied. The man looked at me out of the corner of one eye. "Pleasure," he said with a little nod. The truck was warm. The dusty vents blew hot, dry air in my face. Whiny old country music murmured out of the speakers. There was a styrofoam coffee cup propped up next to the gear shift and a cigar smoldering in the metal ashtray sticking out of the dashboard. The man saw me looking at it. "Sorry," he said, and he ground its glowing tip out. His hair and his mustache looked like they used to be light brown, but they were mostly gray now. He had friendly wrinkles around his eyes and mouth. Smile lines, my mom called them. We drove in silence for a few moments. So, what business you got at Paradise? I licked my lips and looked out the window. The tops of the trees were whipping in the wind. Puddles on the side of the road were reflecting only black sky. Just sightseeing, I said without looking at him. Huh, was all he answered. I let the warmth of the truck seep through my skin and into my bones. I'd need it for what lay ahead. That's a good dog you got there, he said, tickling Bo's head. Bo's tail thumped against the seat. Yeah, he's a good one. Everybody ought to have a dog, he said thoughtfully, his hand still scratching Bo. Dogs teach you love and kindness. They remind you what's important. He nodded and took a sip of coffee. A life ain't much of a life without a dog in it. That's what I always said. Yeah, I let my forehead drop against the cool window. All the thoughts I'd had walking had followed me inside, like ghosts haunting me. But dogs lie, I said quietly, almost to myself. The man took another sip of his coffee. Sure, of course they do. But their dying don't make their living worth any less. I smiled, kind of. My mom said something like that once. Yeah, must be a special lady. Yeah, she is. My eyelids were as heavy as my feet had been on the road. My heart, too. You're tired. Yeah, sorry. Nah, go ahead and rest if you need to.